it's moved on a long way. It's still got a long way to go. But whereas last year there were very few portfolios that we could talk about on mainland Europe that were on the market or had even traded, yesterday headquarters portfolio exchanged in Germany, a significant portfolio. There are other portfolios that are being traded in Germany and elsewhere. So I think rather than it just being the acquisition of a few schemes built by a local developer, I think the big players can now look at mainland Europe and they can see the fabulous demographics that we were just talking about, huge student numbers, largely obsolete supply that's been hardly touched for the last 20, 30 years. And they can see fabulous opportunities, but there are challenges in each market and they're all different. And I think if we are going to talk about pan-European, I think the thing we've got to be very wary of is trying to assume the same metrics will work in each location, because some of these locations you can switch between resi and student very easily. Others, that's not at all possible. And culturally as well, catered, non-catered, it's a cultural difference. In Spain, for example, with other parts of Europe. Many of these countries in Europe, the students predominantly still go to a relatively local university. And I think some of these countries have got to establish a culture of going away to university in a way that they don't yet. And actually they need to do internal marketing. These universities need to market themselves to their own nationals before we all get too carried away with the international student market. But that's a very strong market too. So there's huge potential. We're still barely touching the surface, I think, in most European markets. The UK market is probably 10, 12 years, I think, ahead of the most advanced markets in mainland Europe. I would think probably Germany and Spain. Dublin's coming on pretty fast as well. The French market has a degree of maturity, but in a totally different way. As we were just saying, there is a lot of student housing in France, but it's not the sort of thing that an institution can go and buy. So the institutions want product, and if they can't find it, they will start looking elsewhere for other things. And it's interesting that quite a few of the parties who are involved are also looking at the private rental sector for residential, and I think we ought to think of student alongside some of these other residential markets.
Okay, yeah.
Perhaps can I add something? I mean, it's very interesting. In the UK, you said transaction volume was close to 5 billion. I mean, in Germany in 2014, the whole market was 240 million. I mean, it's funny. It's nothing if you compare that to the UK. But I think we have done a lot of education during the last 6 years, because I remember all the discussions I had 6 years ago when I went to the German pension funds, who are not the most aggressive investors in Germany. So for them, it was unbelievable 6 years ago to invest in student homes. But now, after 6 years under operation of these assets, and due to the low interest environment, it's getting very interesting niche also for the German institutional players. And now for the first time we can prove, because we are managing these assets for the last 6 years, and everyone is talking about operation. I mean, honestly speaking, it's a resi building where you have a certain fluctuation with 35%. But the good thing is, you know exactly when the fluctuation will take place during the holidays. So it's not rocket science to manage these things. And in addition to that, you have a huge advantage. So we have always the guarantee from the tenants in place. So rental loss is nearly zero. And if you are able to manage fluctuation, you can always catch up to market rent, which is not possible in the normal resi business. So I think if you see the numbers over the last 6 years, there are very strong arguments for that asset class.
I mean, just to add to that, I totally agree. But last year in 2015, the transaction volume was 520 million, so it almost doubled in 1 year, and it's now, you know, a little bit significant, 500 million, but it's much smaller still. Yeah.